into another exciting chapter of the Tales and Storytime with the Naked Bigfoot. I am your humble host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. But before we begin tonight's tale, tonight's story, tonight's discussion, there's always my disclaimers. The opinions of the host, moi, are clearly his own. He is not here to dissuade, persuade, or change anyone's mind about anything. I merely wish to inform, to entertain. Yay, Chris, glad to have you on, dude. Awesome. For those of you who don't know Chris from Bald and Bonkers, that paranormal, just a quick shout out to these guys. Chris and Dakota, they're both pretty awesome guys. You should really check out their channel. It ranges from anything from all sorts of subjects in the paranormal, and also in aliens and UFO studies as well. I strongly recommend checking them out. They're pretty cool and much more professional than your humble host. I really enjoy them. Really enjoy them. Okay, back to the disclaimers. I am here to entertain. I am here to inform. I am here to share. You're welcome. I am not here to purposefully hurt anyone's feelings or to trample upon anyone's beliefs. I believe in the simple philosophy of live and let be. Everybody has an opinion. You're welcome to share it. I'll be happy to hear your opinion as long as you're willing to hear mine. I'll give you just as much attention as you give me. Now, for those who are more of the sensitive bit, Christine, oh my God, I did not expect you tonight. Thank you, Christine, for coming on. You're awesome. It's so cool to have you on tonight. For those who have sensitive dispositions and are not used to foul language or odd innuendos coming out of the normal YouTube channels that you watch, you are now officially warned that if you are Dakota, if you are sensitive to foul language, to frequent uses of the F-bomb, this may not be the channel for you. If you don't want your children exposed to bad language or sometimes very graphic subject matter, please have them leave the room or put on headphones and watch it in silence if your kid can't leave the room at the time or if you have to watch them. Just put on your headphones and listen as you watch so no one else can hear it. With that said, on with the story. Tonight's discussion is probably going to be me once again kicking up a hornet's nest. I'll tell you what, before I get deep into it, let me tell you what inspired me to have this discussion tonight. I usually am not a major critic of anybody else's professional work in the paranormal field at all. And I actually enjoy watching other people work, and I've learned a great deal from watching other people work, and other people having discussions, and other people being interviewed, and it's really added to my knowledge base a great deal. But there are certain fundamental things I do not believe that truly piss me off to the point where I have to say something, or I have to set records straight, or I have to rant. It's a rare thing for me to do that. For those who know me or experiencing me on Twitter at any time, I rarely talk shit about people. I talk shit about ideas or things that I see that a lot of people do that I think is wrong. But it's, again, a rare thing. But I made the mistake and started watching the Travel Channel again. Specifically, yeah, I'm going to start calling out some shows, so I might ass hurt some people and I might get some really negative feedback on this. But there's a show in particular that really, really, really pushes my buttons to the that just makes me scream, makes my soul scream every time I watch it. I don't know why I continue to watch it. I hold out some kind of hope that they'll change what they're doing, but to date they haven't. But it is the Dead Files on the Travel Channel. What a load. Well, if no one's ever seen the Dead Files, you have a woman, you know, that she claims to be a psychic medium. And you have her partner, who was a former, who was in law enforcement previously, that she goes and she claims that she sees ghosts and the ghosts communicate with her, and she goes and gathers information at supposed haunted sites. He gathers up information during the day, and then they do a big reveal at the end on the information that they found. Okay. Usually, and it's pretty much 99.9% of every episode. Um, yeah, that you and me both now, Christine. But I can't stop watching it because I have no idea why I keep punishing myself. The psychic medium of the show, when she goes into a house, she sees the same thing every episode. She sees shadow figures and dark, malevolent energies everywhere. God knows she even, and she sees incredibly outrageous shit too. I guess for a dramatic effect. And it's always these dark shadow entities are affecting the people. They're feeling weak, or they're causing pain. They're causing anger. It's literally every every episode. She does it every single episode. Like clockwork. It's the same shit. I believe these shadow figures can affect people's health. It's always the fucking same. These overly generalized observations of these shadowy figures, and then she'll pick one thing that she supposedly sees, and she'll go and have a forensics artist draw up a picture of what she sees, and it's usually something completely batshit crazy and outrageous, something you'd read from an old Penny Dreadful novel. But personally, I think she's played too much Dungeons and Dragons, and she's describing things that when she was a 9th level drow wizard, the things that she saw while playing the game. I fuck you not. I truly believe that. It is great entertainment, but there's a number of people out there that are not a part of the paranormal community or the supernatural community or the prescient community, and I'll explain that later, who believe this horse shit, that this is what psychic mediums and psychics and mediums see all the horse shit that comes out of their mouth. They draw a huge audience. They get paid top dollar to spew this crap. They charged $200 to take a picture with them at a fucking expo or something. People drool all over this bullshit, thinking that she's legit and thinking that the clown that she's with is legit as well. But it's one of they're snake oil salesmen. That's what they are. Snake oil salesmen. Okay, I think I've beaten this horse dead and beat it beyond death. Now that you know what I think about, things like that, well, the Travel Channel in general and psychic mediums in general, especially the ones that publicize their bullshit like that, like they do. Okay, I need to pull the anger back in. Let's pull it back in. Let's pull it back in. So I can have a serious discussion without dropping the F-bomb every other word and going back to my favorite subject, which is trashing the Dead Files. And most of those shows that have psychic mediums on them. Now they do have a few that are actually legit. Um, oh, by the way, this psychic medium on the Dead Files does absolutely nothing to help the people. They make up these weird things that they can go get. One time she suggested it's always a suggestion to help them out. It's her actually helping them remove the negative spirits that she sees. She never personally gets involved in it to help. She never dirties her hands. She just tells people what they need to do. And the people that she recommends actually charge quite a bit of money to perform, and I'm using perform, big words perform, to come in and do a performance to remove these negative spirits. Um, One time that I took great offense to is when she said, "Oh, you need to bring in a Reiki energy worker who has to be female and beautiful, and you have to bring in a voodoo priest." Okay, put a pin in that for a second. Bring in a voodoo priest, and they need to come in and you know banish the evil spirits from the house. I sat there and went, "Do you even know what a fucking voodoo priest does, lady?" And that immediately let me know that she was so full of caca bullshit. Um, because I wonder why I can say that. Because I am a fucking voodoo priest. I'm a fucking Hungan. We don't we don't do things for money, and we don't publicize what we do. We do things to help. Period. And we don't do it for the notoriety or the fame. But she has a Rolodex full of people, apparently, including a voodoo priest and a chaos magician. I've met a number of people that do different spellcraft, but I've never met a chaos magician outside of Dungeons and Dragons. She has a Rolodex of people that she can call that'll come in and charge people to come in and do it and perform whatever snake oil show needs to be performed to do it. Okay. I'm now officially done ranting. I think I've done it, for about almost 10 minutes now. I need to stop. Okay. Let's start off, and in the title, you saw the title, and you're probably wondering, of course, be talking about psychic mediums. Um, they do exist. Mediums do exist. People um, like that do exist in this world. That's a fact, number one. Um, but they're very rare. But I'll also be discussing a method and a technique that the legitimate and thank you, Christine. I do have a habit of ranting on occasion, and many people find much joy in my rants. But as you can see, that's just why I'll never have a television show, because it'd be one loud bleep. And I'd have to have a really good legal team too, because they'd sue my ass at the end of every episode. Whoever it was I was ranting on, I'd get my ass sued off. um, but a technique that was actually explained to me, and I was able to observe it in action, that I think helps distinguish between an actual ghost talker or psychic medium versus somebody who's faking it. It's called the past tense method, or the past tense technique. Hey, Mike from Super Horror Show, by the way, those people just pausing to let him know. Super Horror Show is awesome. You need to check out his show. His channel too. He does some amazing animations, and tells some amazing stories on his channel. But I'm glad you discovered the Leshy. There's so much more to that story of the Leshy. But I like to keep things, concise to an hour. But if you ever want to hear more, yeah, just drop me a line and I'll explain more. Or if there's anything that I'm leaving too ambiguous, I'll explain more. Oh God, you're too nice. Okay, what is a psychic medium? Um, Psychic mediums cannot be made. Um, it is a, just what a psychic medium is physically. It is somebody who is, or anybody that can naturally communicate with the spiritual realm, including the once human realm, which is the ghost realm. Um, and you notice I'm saying they can do it naturally. They don't need an object like a divining rods or a Ouija board, um, or anything like that. They don't need objects. They don't need foci to be able to do what they do. It's something that happens naturally for them when they put themselves out there. That's what I mean by a natural um, psychic medium. Those who are born, and I don't want to say gift because most of them don't consider it a gift. They consider it something they got stuck with. It is a generational gift that's passed down from family to family, generation to generation. Um, it runs in bloodlines. Um, Usually, the people who are afflicted, and yeah, I chose that word, afflicted. Um, Usually, the people who are afflicted by it. They just don't. They don't turn 13, hit puberty, and then suddenly start seeing and hearing ghosts. They, as soon as they come out of the womb and enter the mortal world and the mortal realm as a baby, um, they start experiencing spirits and experiencing ghosts as a newborn infant. They do. Um, Most spiritual beings, whether they're once human, unhuman, or inhuman, um, they're drawn immediately to these people that they can perceive from, because psychic mediums, their spirit, their mind, their soul, their perception, their senses, they vibrate at a different frequency than the average human beings vibrate as. They can, which allows them to be able to see things outside of your normal perception, see into other dimensions, pull back the veil between dimensions and be able to access them and see them and communicate with the beings that exist in that other dimension. Um, and again, that's something they can do naturally. Like I said, most psychic mediums they're born, they're natural, it's in their bloodlines. Um, Also have a high incidence of insanity. They're driven insane if they are part of a family that the family members have not, through the generations, have not accepted and integrated this gift or this affliction into their life and normalized it, so they can explain it to the children that are born that are afflicted slash gifted with it, um, but wish to keep it a dark secret, um, because they don't want to stand out as freaks. They don't want to be accused of witchcraft. They don't want to be accused of being possessed, or demonic. I mean, some of the great trials of the world and some of the great issues of the world, like the various during the Spanish Inquisition. Um, a great many of true psychic mediums, the entire bloodlines were wiped out, because they thought the entire family were witches, that they were too open with their gifts. So when the Inquisition came around, they burned the entire family. They burned every member of the family they could find and wiped out entire bloodlines of very powerful psychic mediums because they were too open with their gifts. So other families learned to hide it and not talk about it, or talk about it and just not make it public. It was a very dark secret in the family. But this is not something that you can turn off once you're born. I mean, you're born being a human radar dish, being a human satellite dish to the spirit world. It's not something you can easily regulate on your own. I agree. I agree with you, Chris. And without a family member or somebody there to guide them or to tell them what they're experiencing is real or natural, is real, and that it's not something to be ashamed of. People have they've literally lost their minds. They've gone crazy, been accused of being schizophrenic, all levels of schizophrenic. A lot of schizophrenics are not true schizophrenics. They don't have a chemical imbalance. They're part of the supernaturally afflicted. Um, but of course, modern medicine would never accept or diagnose them as being psychically attuned to, you know, other dimensions. It's easier to medicate them and to suppress it. There are high incidences of psychic mediums committing suicide at an early age. Um, Homelessness is a huge thing with psychic mediums who don't have help or have people to come out to help them. Um, some psychic mediums, whether they're male or female, choose not to get married because they are socially awkward. They don't know it. Think of it as a form of supernatural autism. They're not able to interact well with the living because every waking moment of their life they're dealing with the dead. Oh, is something going on? Papa Joey's here! Yay! I'm glad you're here, dude. You'll have to catch up on my earlier rants that I did. Um, if, by the way, just as an aside, if you hear a fan in the background, it's because I am fucking burning up hot, and I have no idea why. My internal furnace is on overdrive right now, so I'm sorry if you hear a fan in the background, or if my voice comes out more ululating than normal. It's probably the fan, probably, because they come out at night mostly. Um, like I was saying, I they usually don't get married, but if they do get married, I call it a form of paranormal or supernatural autism. Um, they don't interact well with vanilla people, and when I use the word vanilla, I'm talking about everyday people um, who perceive the world with just the senses that they have, not with any preternatural sense whatsoever. That's what I mean by vanilla. So you'll hear me referring to people as vanilla on more than one occasion. It's not a term that I'm using to talk about a race of people. It's vanilla can apply to anybody and everybody if they're normal and can only perceive the world without preternatural um, senses. There is a very, and again, these afflicted bloodlines that produce psychic mediums, especially after great spiritual purges like the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, which was the worst, which I'll always go back and refer to that. Spanish Inquisition was the worst. But the other various witch trials throughout France and other parts of Europe and England as well. Um, they purged again entire bloodlines of psychic mediums, wiped them off the map, burned them, tortured them, killed them as being, in league with the devil. They wiped them off the map. Which, when they did that, they made the world the world became less than what it could be when that happened. So now these bloodlines are a lot rarer. Believe it or not, most Asian countries, Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, they have their lines of family lines of psychic mediums as well. but they never went through a time in their history. They accepted it in their culture that these bloodlines existed. It was actually a great honor to have someone marry into a bloodline of psychic medium bloodline, especially in Japan. To marry into that family was considered a great honor. To be able to be a part of that family and to produce children with that family, to be able to pass those gifts along within that family. Um, they never went through any type of purge in their history where they persecuted groups of people. I mean, it happened later, but we're talking about religious groups and stuff. We're talking about spiritual groups of psychic medium families. They never purged entire families based on them being mediums and psychics of some sort. They were actually honored and revered and respected in most Asian communities and Indonesian and Indian communities. Um, so I always found it odd that these purges and this persecution only happened in Western culture. It never happened in Eastern and Near Eastern cultures. I always found that completely fascinating. Um, Also in African cultures as well. Um, they still had the same sensibilities that the Eastern cultures had. They revered these psychic bloodlines. They encouraged them. They gave them places of honor um, in the tribes and within the community. Again, the persecution and the purging of these bloodlines is unique um, to the Western civilizations out there. I just found that interesting. You might too. Okay, that just gave a quick synopsis of where I believe where the psychics come from, and they belong to a bloodline that they perceive the world at a different vibrational frequency than well their senses operate at a different frequency than ours do, and allow them to perceive these other dimensions and these other realities around them. Now let's fast forward to modern times. And talk about the psychic medium right now and the century that we are existing in, because you've probably heard me say this on previous discussions on the channels, that I do believe that we're undergoing a new spiritual awakening, especially here in the United States. You got to catch the whole show. Um, You mean that whether it's interesting, Papa Joey, about how it's these purges of preternatural families and psychic mediums in Western cultures so different from how it's revered in Eastern culture? I wrote a whole paper about it once. I got laughed about it when I read it at the paper at a symposium, but because they didn't want to hear the truth. It was my Fox Mulder moment. Story for another day. And that was, by the way, I said that specifically for you, Mike, at Super Horror Show. That's a story for another day. It's a drinking game now, by the way. Every time I say that, you have to take a drink. Um, you helped me develop that game. Uh, it's all about bloodlines. It's how it's passed down. The traits were, and that trait was encouraged in the bloodlines, and up until modern times, it began to be suppressed and repressed after the purges that happened in European society, and it started again after the 1920s here in the United States. There began to be we had a slight surge in spiritualism here in the United States, um, up until the end of the 40s. I'll say towards the end of World War II, towards the end of that. And I seriously believe that it was the war that made people more pragmatic and made people not want to. Because after World War II, we started going and we started dealing with the spread of communism uh, and socialism throughout the world. And you didn't want to stand out in any strange way. You didn't want to be the oddball because you were a psychic medium in your family, your whole family was. You didn't want to stand out and bring the attention of people that may call you a communist. Because that was the worst thing you could be called after World War II. It was to be called a communist or a communist sympathizer or a socialist. So you did everything you could not to stand out. At least that's been my experience in my studies of that and speaking to people who belong to a bloodline. And let's get it back, shift back into modern times. I have been able to identify, based on my genealogy research, 12 major psychic medium bloodlines that exist today in the United States. There's probably many, many more, but there's 12 that I identified that were the honest engine, true deal. There are only 3 of those bloodlines, 3 of those family lines that have accepted their gifts, their generational gifts, their family gifts, their inherited gifts, or their inherited afflictions, and come to terms with it. And they have members of their family who are practicing psychic mediums out here in modern times. They don't do it as a full-time job. They do it as something part-time, and they only do it. There are 3 people out of these 3 bloodlines that I'm actually very good friends with and know extremely well that I've worked with them. And they actually explained to me how their gift was passed down to their families, which led me to begin to do my research and do my study into what a psychic medium, how it was passed along in the bloodlines and the history behind it and all of that. Let me pause for a second. Anybody with any questions so far? Four, three, two, one. Okay, let's keep going. And depending on let me rephrase that. They've got day jobs, very normal day jobs. One is a middle school teacher. Another one works at an electric company. He's pretty awesome. He's actually a line worker at an electric company. Actually, he's a line worker at Dominion Power here in Virginia. Incredibly brilliant mind. Very, very scary, powerful as far as working with the psychic medium world. And the third one, she was a housewife for the longest time, but she decided to go out and get a real job, and she actually works in Tennessee at a distillery now in Tennessee. She decided to go out and start to interact because she was the most troubled, had the most trouble with her gift. That she had members of her family who were proud of their gift. She had members of her family who were ashamed of their gift, and members of her family who saw it as an affront to God. So she came up with all of these ideas being thrown at her. So it made her a bit dysfunctional when it came to working and dealing with people in the real world, and dealing with people in general. I feel the most for her, and I'm not known for handling people or dealing with people with kid gloves, but her psyche is so fragile after so much craziness in her family that her gift is incredibly bright. She is a fucking railroad lantern to every spiritual thing that's out there, whether it be a once human or an inhuman or an unhuman entity. She draws them in. She is a living magnet for those damn things. And I had the opportunity to work with her and help her be able to screen them out. You can't shut them out, but you can screen the voices out quite a bit. No, it works at a distillery and she works at one in Tennessee. Damn it, quite a famous distillery in Tennessee. Um, I'm gonna call the gentleman I referred to. I don't want to use real names because I can't. I have learned recently to be careful of using people's real names because you can be sued for using information, to using people's real names when you're discussing things without their permission, unless they're historical figures. These are not historical figures. So I'm going to call him Bob, works at Dominion Power, or Larry. Larry would probably work better for him because he reminds me of Larry the Cable Guy. Um, of course, she, the young lady who works at the distillery in Tennessee, she does not go out and do investigations with paranormal groups. She does not whore her skills out at all to anybody. She doesn't have a shop. People coming in, she can read their auras or anything. She doesn't do that. Um, I got to know her quite by accident and was able to help her out a great deal. And she needed friends, crazy friends like me, apparently, in her life. So, and that's what I was to her, a crazy friend that helped her maintain a certain amount of stability in her life. But the other two, the man and the other woman, here in Virginia, they actually enjoy going out. Their skills, they're very talented, but their skills are, when you compare them to hers, my distillery girl, theirs are more, their skills are much less than what she is. They can see, they can communicate, but they don't have this shining presence, that shining energy that draws things to them like she does. Um, that long to interact with the living or the mortal or the physical world. They'll get the occasional one that'll come in uninvited, but she draws them in like a fucking magnet, like flies to shit. They come straight for her and go straight for her every time. And she couldn't go down the street, and God knows she could never attend a funeral, because it was just utterly miserable for her. It was terrifying for her. She'd always end up a crying mess at the end of it, but not for the reason, especially at a funeral, but not for the reasons why people thought she was crying. She was crying because she was fucking terrified and driven crazy. I've been able to work with the other two when I've been called in as a for consultation purposes. I was able to work with them, um, and they are the ones who taught me, um, the now a true psychic medium. And I'm saying true because there's not that many that are true. You heard me early on talk about the Dead Files and that waste of space person on there who claims to be a psychic medium and see and interact with spirits. Um, Again, this is a gift. This is an affliction and a gift that's few and far between. Again, it's found mostly in bloodlines. It never skipped a generation. It just follows straight through the blood. It cannot be diluted. It's something, if the speck of the blood is in you, then you've got it. And you're stuck with it to a greater or lesser degree. They taught me a method. Oh, good Lord, where'd the time go? I better talk faster and stop rambling. Everybody's probably going to have to go to sleep soon. I know I will. Uh, a methodology that I've seen a lot of psychic mediums, and that I know of a lot of psychic mediums, well, the ones that I know of personally, and the ones I've heard of, they employ this method. It's called the past tense method. Now, if you watch a lot of paranormal investigators, who have psychic mediums with them, or if they don't, if they're out investigating on their own, or sometimes they're accompanied by a psychic medium, or somebody who is afflicted by some other greater sense of the spiritual world around them that goes with them. They go in and they speak to the room, or they'll speak to the location and to the potential spirits of the location. Again, whether it be inhuman, unhuman, or once human. They speak to them in present tense terms. They'll address it by the names that they've heard based on the legends or the stories or that they've heard about when they go there. They address them in present tense terms, like, do you want me here? Your name is. But a true and a good psychic medium, and in the same sense, a good paranormal investigator too. I know I'm going to piss people off by saying that. When they went into a room, they should use the past tense in their language when they're speaking to them. Like, who were you? Not who are you? Who were you? Were you like, if the name, if you were going there looking at the ghost of Jesse James, you go, were you Jesse James? Were you doing this? You never ask why questions, though. Why questions usually lead, if it's a spirit that's pretending to be something else, usually you're opening the door up when you use present tense or why tense questioning or phrases to them. You're allowing them to lie to you. When you use the past tense to them, they have a much harder time making up the reality, which is a lie to you. Say if it was a once human ghost, and you address it as Joe the Ghost Barber, and you're talking to it in the present tense, and say, Joe the Ghost Barber, can you touch me? Joe the Ghost Barber, can you do this? Joe the Ghost Barber, do that. Go the Ghost Barber, anything. It's always something that takes place in the present, something that it can interact with, that it will not be confused by. But when you start speaking in the past tense, you have a spirit that has to draw actual knowledge, accumulated knowledge, to be able to answer the question. Because most spirits, if they lie to you, it's not a complete lie. It's a way to lead you to whatever goal they have in mind, whether it's mischief, attention, or whatever. Feed you enough half-truths to keep you around. It may say its name is Joe, but its actual name was Annie. You understand that? It's not acknowledging the fact that it's not human. It's acknowledging the fact that it's some different gender with a different name. I know it's splitting hairs when I say that. But usually when you're dealing with shit like this, you have to split hairs to be able to understand them. But when you walk in the room and you're trying to address a specific spirit, okay, let's talk about Jesse James again. If you walk into an old saloon where Jesse James had been at, and you suspect that that he is still at the saloon, or he's at his gravesite and he's haunting, people have seen him, people believe that it is him that's there. You don't go in and immediately start speaking to Jesse James. You need to establish the truthful ground rules about the spirit that you're speaking to by looking at it and saying, were you Jesse James? Not Jesse James. You're not acknowledging it right off the fact that it was Jesse James. You're making it answer you to tell you the truth. Remember when I said in one of my previous shows, you'll see, when you're dealing with spiritual entities, whether they once human ghosts, so to speak, unhuman or inhuman spirits, or even elementals or elemental spirits of the earth, if you ask questions and ask questions or make statements, and God, if you ask them 3 times, were you Jesse James? Were you Jesse James? You're setting up a binding on that spirit that it has to answer you as truthfully as possible. Now, if you just go in and immediately start asking it questions and addressing as Jesse James, it's going to answer you in a way that it thinks you want it to answer you. You're not forcing it to give you the correct answers. And most psychic mediums understand that. They don't immediately go in and start addressing the spirit as the name that they were told that it was. They go into the spirit's past and force it, if it is that spirit that they're trying to address, to draw on the knowledge of its past to answer you. Because Tulpa or an unhuman or an inhuman spirit, they don't have the experience that that other spirit would have. They didn't have a past that they could answer your questions with correctly, if that makes sense. I know I'm stumbling over this, but it took me a while to understand it and a while to sit back and observe it and understand it, then being able to see it being used. It's a fascinating technique. You only address the spirit in the past tense form. And of course, try to keep your questions in groups of three. The same question in groups of three. You don't have to phrase it the exact same way, but it has to be the same question that leads to the same answer. But in groups of three to force it to answer you as truthfully as it possibly can when you do that. Now, I will tell you this. When you set up a binding to a spirit like that force it to answer to you truthfully, or as truthfully as it can, you're going to piss it off. So if it's something that's potentially dangerous or damaging, or so I've been told. This has happened to me too. It's happened to me because I was arrogant. Thought I could do some shit I couldn't do, and then, oof, I paid for it. But that's a story for another day. Take a drink. Oh, fuck, I lost my train of thought. When you're with the psychic medium and you're doing that, what does a psychic medium see when they're addressing the room or addressing the location? You're going to be seriously drunk by the time this is over with. During the course of the questioning, what does the psychic medium see when they're in the room? I have stood beside the psychic mediums that you've heard me talk about earlier, and I, of course, was quite the chatterbox. I want to know what they saw. I asked them, and this is before we'll talk about how my third eye opened in another discussion, in another much later. But I would always ask them, what do you see? They say when they walk into a room that there is a spirit present in that room, that it lights up all of their senses, like static electricity. They can feel it throughout their entire body. Their skin, they get goosebumps. They begin to sweat slightly because their senses, their perceptual senses, are now on high alert because they're in the presence of something. They're in the presence of something preternatural, and that's a real word for those people that are wondering. Preternatural. It's one of my favorite words when I learned what it meant many years ago. That their eyes begin to water, that their mouth becomes dry. They begin to smell things from the past of the spirit, or in the presence of the spirit. Say if it was an unhuman spirit or an inhuman spirit, depending on what it was, is the smell that would assault their senses. They could, for those who have ever, now this is an old saying that some people out west might be able to understand it when I say this, but it's something we used to say in the mountains all the time, that you could smell a rattlesnake. It's actually, which was true. You can't, a lot of snakes you can actually smell in the wild, because one of the defense mechanisms that snakes do is they produce a musk to alert you of their presence. It's funky as shit when they put it off. It's not as bad as a skunk, but you know what it is. You know it's the smell of a snake. Well, these spirits also produce their own scent as well, and they can smell it. They can taste it when they come into a room before they even see it. They know it's in the room with them. They extend their senses from their eyes further out with their mind to be able to actually see it. And they say the first thing they see is a silhouette that appears before them. Without many features, they can tell whether it's male or female easily from the silhouette. And as they focus their attention on that silhouette and block out everything else, the features begin to become more evident, to begin to look more and more like what it looked like in life, or what it could look like if it manifested in the real world, if it's not a once human spirit. But once they do that, the spirit that they're looking at, that they're addressing, can see them then. It sets up a connection between them and that spirit can then see them and they can see it. And then you suddenly they're completely aware of each other then. It can interact with each other then. Yeah, I said it a lot. But that's a story for another day. But once that connection is made and once they set it up between them, the psychic medium can ask all the questions that they want. Now, it's really the investigators that are in the room with them make the attempt to ask questions, communicate with them. But when they have a real psychic medium in the room with them, the spirits will basically ignore the paranormal group that are in there with them, and they'll focus on the one that they feel like they can communicate with the most, and that's the actual psychic medium in the room. So the rest of the world around them dissolves, and it's like being in a dark, enclosed room with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It's just you and that spirit communicating with them. At least that's how it's been described to me. But most of the time, the spirit wants to talk about other things other than what that person, that psychic medium, is asking questions of. They don't have a lot of control over the conversation, but they can steer the conversation to back to where they want to go and to be able to answer questions. Now, this is done. Now, answering questions, communicating with the spirit. How are they doing that? There are many ways that psychic mediums are able to do it, able to channel the information they receive from the spirit. Sometimes it's through auditory. They'll actually speak to them. Speak in the room, usually when the psychic medium's only when they can hear it. Because again, they're vibrating at the frequency that these things are vibrating at, and they can understand what they're saying. Or they can do something as simple as automatic writing, which those who don't know, that's when the spirit comes and uses the hands and the arms and the body of the medium in question. When they ask them a question, they use their hand to write it out with, the answers to it with. And usually what the psychic medium does is just take the pen or the pencil, and they'll just start on a piece of paper making the motions of writing. Sometimes it's done in a circular manner. And the spirit will reach in and take the hand. And if you ask it, was your name John? Your hand will go no if the answer was no, because it's using your hand to communicate with. Sometimes they communicate through smells, through colors, through light and darkness. They may flare brilliantly with the question, because some of them may not have enough energy to be able to communicate verbally or through somebody who's doing automatic writing. They may not have the strength to be able to do that, because one thing a psychic medium will never do, which is something which drives me bananas when I hear paranormal researchers or paranormal investigators do, is when they go into a room and says, use my energy to communicate, or use my energy to make something happen so I'll know that you're real. Really? Any psychic medium would tell you that is one of the most dangerous things you can ever do in the paranormal world, is giving something free reign and access over your very life's energy. There are a lot of dubious spirits in this preternatural world, in this supernatural world, who can use that energy to either hurt you. Now, they can drain enough energy out of you to give you a fucking heart attack, for cat's sake, or have you go into respiratory distress, or to fucking have you have an embolism, for crying out loud. They're drawing from your life, and you gave them permission to do it. No real psychic medium is that stupid to invite something in that at first would be, you say they were communicating with a spirit of a child. No psychic medium is going to say, if you need my energy to communicate with me better, you can have it. Okay. So this child realizes that you're giving it something. You're giving it a treat. You're giving it a piece of candy, which is your life energy, your spiritual energy, which governs your every being. And it reaches in and takes that piece of candy. But like a child, everybody knows children, one piece is never enough. It's going to keep pulling that energy from you because you opened up the door and allowed it to leech it off of you. And it will not stop until it's satiated, or until you get the fuck far away from the situation as quickly as possible. They can cause all kinds of horrible, horrible, horrible health and psychological damage to you if you let them do that. And I've actually seen that happen to people that were stupid enough to let that happen to them and to allow that to happen. And they would usually say it or pronounce it before I would look at them and go, you need to shut the fuck up now and get out of here now. Sorry, that was my rant. But just to, I don't know how helpful this was to be able to talk about psychic mediums in general. I thought it'd be interesting for you, everybody, for me to share the information I was able to pull forth about bloodlines and the European purging, and the Eastern acceptance. Attachments are fascinating, Christine. I'm glad you said that, or wrote that. Attachments are absolutely fascinating. Attachments are like stray dogs or stray cats. And you're right. Once you feed them, once you give them a biscuit once, they're going to follow you until they can get another biscuit from you. And the thing is, once you give them that first biscuit, you've opened up the door a crack and you're allowing it to sneak its hands in and keep taking treats from you, which happens to be your energy from you, and your life energy from you, and your spiritual energy from you. And usually that's what attachments are all about. You fed it, but you didn't feed it enough. It's become quite greedy. So it's going to follow you to continue to get that treat daily. And then that's usually when you have to go to a real psychic medium and convince them to come into you and help you communicate with it, to tell it to back the fuck off, and that you're closing the door to the candy counter. So, well, guys, I've been to a few supposedly haunted prisons in my time, and there was only one, I think, out of 20 that I went to that was actually had something in it that was active and very active and very vicious that was in it. But it was ended up being a non-human spirit. Come to find out, it wasn't the spirit of anybody who had lived there. It was an entity that was created from the abundance of negative emotions and negative energy that was left behind, that it had manifested and become semi-aware. But that's a story for another day. You talk about it. It was a something we call in the spiritual world a gestalt being, um, which is an accumulation of energies and thought forms that would normally you wouldn't think would connect to one another, but they do. But they find a way to become this gestalt, this single-minded entity, um, which ends up just being this absolutely thing of chaos, and it's completely unpredictable, and they're completely dangerous. These gestalt entities are completely dangerous. A lot of paranormal investigators who go to places where there was great misery or great negativity by groups and groups of people, like prisons, um, where the negativity just coats the walls and the floors around them. It paints the walls. The energy does that. These things becomes somewhat aware, and they gather together and again form this gestalt entity that again is insanity personified, and they're incredibly dangerous, um, and not easy to get rid of. Um, but they also have a bad habit of following people home or damaging people in a way to where they think they're being followed home. So, okay, I'm going to end that because I would really like to have a separate discussion about gestalt entities on a different talk, which I think people would probably find fascinating. Because again, I was able to encounter a gestalt um, that completely traumatized me for the longest time. Um, but that's a story for another day. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and watching the show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you didn't enjoy it, hit the dislike button. You will not hurt a feeling. I'm open to constructive criticism. So please leave any constructive criticism in the comments below. If you feel inclined, you may find Mike the Naked Bigfoot on Twitter. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to hit the subscribe button here. And as always, I look forward to our next discussion. Everybody have a great night. Have a non-scary